by Leadership Books. In just a moment, our host, Joseph Baker, will be joining us, along with a very special guest. Before we get started, I would like to introduce you to Joseph. He's a podcaster, event producer, writer, speaker, and audience builder. His passion is to help authors, speakers, and entrepreneurs build their audiences to monetize their leadership. Won't you please welcome our host, Joseph Baker.
Well, thank you, Ron, so much for that intro, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers today to the Compendium Podcast, hosted by Leadership Books. Today, we have a very special guest. We have Jim Domen with us. Jim is going to be sharing a little bit about his book, Not a Mistake, and we're going to get to know him a little bit as an author and find out what he is up to these days. Jim, welcome to the Compendium Podcast.
Hey, Joseph, it's great to be here.
So we just were kind of catching up before we started. Sounds like you're in Orange County, so you're just really suffering today, right? Is that true?
Yeah, call it what you will. We're based in Orange County, and I was born in California, and that's where God has called me to work primarily. But I'll say my ministry's grown across the United States. So real excited to see the Spirit of God moving across our nation.
That's awesome. And I commend you also for continuing the work of the ministry there in California. I'm one of many who moved out a couple of years ago, but like I've said, if all the Christians move out of California, California is in a lot of trouble. So we need people like yourself that will be bold and brave and continue to minister there.
Amen to that, brother.
So anyway, just jumping back into our episode today, Jim Domen has pastored since 2004. He received his Master of Divinity from Azusa Pacific University in 2008. Jim is an author. He's a founder of multiple organizations, one of them being churchunited.com. He and his wife, Amanda, of over 13 years, have been married. They have 3 children. You can see more of their story at jimdomen.com, but we're going to get into a little bit of your story. Jim,
Awesome.
what are you up to today? I know you're probably like me. You do a lot of things. You wear a lot of hats. But what are you most excited about right now?
You know, Church United is growing nationally, and we just got back from Washington, D.C. And, today's May 1st, 2023. And I say that because the Speaker of the House was in Israel today speaking to the Knesset, and he referenced a meeting with Joe Biden on February 1st. And I got a picture with Kevin McCarthy at that event at the Museum of the Bible at a national repentance and prayer event, and was able to confess on the sins of homosexuality, brought friends of mine, former LGBTQ people, and we confess those sins. And amazingly, this revival breaks out in our nation a week later. And then today I flip on Newsmax, or actually Epic Times, and I see Kevin McCarthy in Israel. And God's on the move, even though you may not see it, but pastors are awakening and engaging in culture, and I love it. And I just sense revival in our churches and awakening in our culture.
For a long time, it seems like the church has been a bit complacent in our country. We've gotten very comfortable, and we have so many luxuries and amenities. We haven't been challenged in a lot of ways in the last 100 years, but that seems to be changing. And so with that comes new opportunity to rise up. So I'm glad that people like you are saying, hey, there's a window of time right here for influence and leadership. Tell me a little bit about that from your experience.
Absolutely, Joseph. A lot of pastors, I'll say, are not engaged in government. They're not really engaged in the culture. They just kind of do church normal, and Church United helps pastors speak truth to power. We take them to Washington, D.C., we take them to their state capitals and help them not only speak truth to power, but as Christian leaders to shine in public, like Jesus has called us, to be lights, to be salt. And that's kind of I'll say the mission of what we're doing with Church United as we help pastors awaken and engage. And we're just seeing not only transformation in California, but as I said, for the first time ever, we took pastors from the Northwest of America and the heartland of America. And they're like, Jim, we've got to bring a whole contingent of pastors from these regions to the Capitol and get them fired up and engaged. And Joseph, it's happening. So I'm just praising the Lord to see Spirit move and really bringing hope to Christians who, I think there's a lot of us out there who are hopeless.
Talk to me a little bit about the opportunity to lead and the opportunity to influence in this kind of way, right? I think that nowadays, especially believers, we get intimidated by culture. The voices that, let's say, are on the other side, they can be loud, they can be intimidating, they can even be violent at times and persecute.
Absolutely.
Is getting a little bit worse. But what is on the positive side, though? What are you seeing? Like, what is the real? Give us a real life example, if you can, of like how you broke through that and you saw what the opportunity actually was. Give us something.
Yeah, so God's wired me for his kingdom and government. And church and government don't play real well together. And this is real, I think, for my testimony, being a former homosexual, that, I always wrestle with God. Why me? Why me? Why did I have to have this sin issue? Why do I have to be so different? And it's not normal. And, I'd never had the opportunity to be married and have kids and all these types of things. That yet I'll never forget, God spoke to my heart. I was doing an event in downtown Los Angeles with a bunch of senior pastors that I've never met before. And he told me, do you see with your story, you can get to their hearts really quickly. And you don't have to say much, but just your story of transformation, you can reach their hearts. And then now you have your ministry is now relational instead of transactional. And Joseph, that's huge, because I'm in the trenches with these pastors as they're taking a stand for righteousness, whatever the topic is. And I'll tell you right now, the biggest thing, we hear a lot about, Pride Month and LGBTQ, but the whole transgender movement is just unbelievable what has happened in a relatively short amount of time. But what I see, the pastors that are standing and taking a stand, God's not only blessing them, but growing their churches and moving as they speak the words of Jesus in kindness, but also in truth. As and I really want to role model Christ in my life, but as we see Jesus call people out on their sins, before he did that, he addressed their problems. He healed them, he fixed them, whatever that issue was, he would do that and then would say, go and sin no more. And so that's kind of that heartbeat of what I'll say the pastors in Church United have. And as you said, specifically that leadership, God's called me for such a time as this to lead, I believe, his church, to stand for righteousness and to speak truth to power. And our network has grown from a couple hundred pastors in 2016 to well over 2,500 pastors. And many of them in California are also Spanish-speaking pastors.
Mm.
And again, I say that with all humility, but it's really what God has used through a broken man like me, a wretch like me, to help lead his church to speak truth to power.
Mm. Well, let's talk a little bit about your book, Not a Mistake, and tell us a little bit about what was the big idea behind this book.
The title or the subtitle says it, Not a Mistake, Parents Hope for Their Gay Son. And it was the word hope is really the big idea for the book. I put my parents through a living hell when I came out as gay, when I went into the lifestyle. And mind you, this is before it was a popular thing. It was not in vogue. It wasn't the cool thing to be LGBTQ. We did not have all the corporations supporting this. My parents were embarrassed and ashamed and did not know what to do. And when I came back to Christ, that wasn't my first initial motive to do this, but after coming back June 8th, 2002, over 20 years, God put on my heart to write a book that would reach parents and encourage them and give them hope not to stop praying, to encourage them to fast on behalf of their child. And even if you're a same-sex struggler or dealing with LGBTQ issues, a book that would give you a pathway out, that someone has walked in your shoes and that change is possible.
Mm. Tell us one quick thing here, just scrolling my notes here. Give us sort of a secret within the book, or maybe an aha moment, right? What's something that surprised you, even as you were writing the book, prepping the content? What's something that kind of stood out to you?
What came out was really fascinating. I talked to my parents, and the book talks about, my dad was an LA County Sheriff, drill instructor. He worked various roles in the LA County Sheriff's Department, but as a DI at the Sheriff's Academy, he was mean as nails. The cadets could not believe my father had children, just to give you an idea. Got a military background. So all that to say, when I first shared with my parents as a sophomore in high school that I was gay, or thought I was a homosexual. I didn't use the word gay back then. He just broke down and started weeping. I'd never seen my dad weep before. And it freaked me out. I didn't know what to do. I mean, I'd cried before, but my dad, I'd never seen him cry. Well, when I wrote the book, I did not realize that he finally told me, "Hey, Jim, do you know why I was crying then?" I said, "No, why?" He said, "You were my son and you were battling and struggling all alone with no one to walk with you." And that just was so profound, Joseph. And yet
Mm.
at the same time, that you can kind of see the brokenness in our relationship. Why couldn't my dad ever shared that with me as a 16-year-old young man who was confused with the sexuality, or I mean, I'm going to say so much confused, believed 110% that I was a homosexual. That would have been so powerful if he would have shared that with me then, or maybe not that moment because he was so broken, that maybe the next day or a couple hours later or something, but no, it was well over 20 years later. But even at that moment, that still ministered to my heart and my soul, that my dad had that kind of a heart, that he was grieved, and it was because his son was so alone and had no one to journey with him.
Mm. Tell
But
us
if I
a
may,
oh, go
let
ahead.
me share kind of the redemption of that too. When I came back June 8th, 2002, my parents invited me back home, and it was the last place I wanted to go as a grown man. I had traveled the world, had my own business, my own home, but I had lost everything. And my dad said, "Son, we don't have cows in our backyard. We've got a house with a view." But he said, what I can do is take you to the finest restaurant in Orange County. We went to the Summit House, which is in Fullerton on top of a hill. You can actually see the North Orange County hills in downtown Los Angeles from that restaurant. But he said, "I want to kill proverbially the fatted calf from Luke 15, because I want to rejoice my lost son has come back home." So he took me and we got filet mignon, and I think I probably got lobster to boot. But that type of a meal to celebrate that their son had come home. And you know what, Joseph, that really ministered to my heart, and a way to really celebrate what God was doing and had begun in my life.
Mm. And then kind of moving forward, you did end up getting married, you now have kids, and you have a ministry there in Orange County. So your life's in a brand new place, or probably not brand new anymore, but it's in a new place. Tell us a little bit about your life now.
Joseph, I love being a husband. I love being a daddy. I'm still my kid's superhero. I mean, they're all they're 9, 6, and 4. So I come home from trips or speaking, and I'm the superhero, and I so love that. But I'll say my parents did a great job raising us, but my wife and I have taken the best things from both of our parents and implemented that into our family and how we raise our children. And I'm very intentional about father-son relationship with my son, very intentional with daddy-daughter relationships, and helping them from a male perspective understand healthy sexuality, what that is, what that means, and their identity is beautiful as a woman, or I should say as a little girl or a young lady, and my son's identity as a little boy, and as he goes into a young man, is very important, and how I get to speak and play into that, as well as my wife on the feminine side of things. So yeah, I love the opportunity to live, as I say, a restored life on earth, and not just have to wait till heaven.
So, and beyond the Church United and some of the other things that you're doing, how are you helping people these days?
So a variety of different ways. I wrote the book, Not a Mistake, Parents Hope for Their Gay Son. And that's really kind of a very narrow market, although the LGBTQ issue has exponentially exploded. And I just read a poll, actually, a Fox News anchor just emailed me and said, "Jim, like 25% of Gen Z think they're LGBTQ or believe they are." But still, that's still a small segment of our population. But I just finished my second book, Breaking Sin's Grasp, Your Temptation Doesn't Define You.
Mm.
And it's over the last 20 years as I've journeyed with men to help set them free from pornography, from sex, from lust. And I include my own story of sugar and carb addiction, which I think probably is with a greater threat than all of this stuff. the obesity in America, but I hit all these different, even digital and device addictions. The book isn't specifically regarding addictions, but it's how to help set men free. And you know what, Joseph? It's the same pathway. It's the same pathway I went with my sin of homosexuality, but really I tell different stories of men that I've journeyed with and help set them free. And the men's group that I'm leading, we're going through the book I just wrote and the study guide questions, and they're just like, this is so real. This is so transparent. How come pastors aren't preaching like this from their pulpits? Because this is helping us be set free. And I really think this book, my prayer is that it'd be a bestseller, not for number of copies sold, but it's going to transform men's lives, and how the wives or the girlfriends or the moms who have been praying and interceding for their men behind the scenes, we tell little snapshots of those through the different stories of the men that I've walked through. And Joseph, I'm going to be really honest, not every story is a success. I mean, a very close friend of mine committed suicide during the pandemic, and I walked with him through his issues of sexual brokenness. Another gentleman that, wasn't set free and continued to choose sin. So it's very real. And I think it's going to reach a lot of men in the church to give us greater freedom so we can proclaim Christ all the more boldly, not only in our home lives, but in our school and work environments.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today. And, for the viewers and listeners who want to get a hold of you, connect with you, your content, your current books, your future books, what's the best way for people to do that?
You can do that at churchunited.com. It's kind of easy to remember, churchunited.com, if you don't remember my name, but my name, jimdomen.com as well. And that's like DOM as in Mary, E as in Edward, N as in Nancy.com. But Church United, all those will eventually get to me, or my assistant will respond to you. And if you want to get a book, please do. We'll start doing pre-orders soon for Breaking Sin's Grasp. But until then, you can get Not a Mistake on jimdomen.com or notamistake.com, as well as on Amazon. If you want a Kindle or Audible version, you can do that there as well. And of course, leadership books.
Yes. Thank you very much. Well, great. Thank you so much, Jim, for joining us today. For all of our viewers and listeners, be sure to connect with Jim, churchunited.com, jimdomen.com. Thank you so much for being vulnerable, Jim, just sharing some of your story, how you're helping, how you're ministering the world, and how you're making an impact. That's one of the big things that we focus on with this podcast is each author and speaker, they have a message that they're trying to get to the world, something that really resonates, inside of their soul. And so thank you for that. Thank you for sharing with us, being honest, and having a powerful ministry. And we will catch all of you in the next episode. Be sure to stay tuned at leadershipbooks.com. And thanks for watching.
God bless you, Joseph. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for today's broadcast. I do hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And be sure to visit us online at leadershipbooks.store. There you'll find the works of some of the finest thought leaders today. And be sure to tune in here each week to gain even deeper insights from one of those leaders on the Compendium Podcast.